Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friends Who Crime.
Friends Who Crime.
All right, guys, welcome back. Today, I am joined by my friend Courtney. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Good. We're going to talk about a crazy case today, but before we get into it, tell me who you are, how you know me, and your relationship to true crime.
I'm Courtney. I know you through my boyfriend, James. You guys have a really great group of UT friends who all went to music school together, so it's been really fun hanging out with all of you.
We're crazy.
And I really like true crime, but I mostly watch documentaries and stuff on Netflix. I'm not much of a podcaster, so this is pretty new to me.
Okay, nice. That's cool because, like, with Katie in the first episode, she's the opposite. She listens to a lot of podcasts, but she doesn't watch a lot of stuff. So that's cool that it's switched this time around.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite documentary or a favorite case?
I really like the Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix.
Yeah.
James hates those because there's no answer at the end, but I kind of like that.
Yeah.
You can kind of make up your own answer, so
Same.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I like watching things because you can put the faces to the names and it kind of builds the narrative a little more.
Yeah, and even sometimes like the fake dramatizations of of the events are like entertaining in their own way.
Yeah.
Even though they're kind of cheesy sometimes.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's do a quick trigger warning. This episode's going to talk about abduction and kind of abduction of children. So I'm going to put some mental health resources in the show notes. Refer to those if you need to. But this is going to be a really fun one. There's a documentary on this. It's called Chowchilla. It's on Max. And it's a really fun one to watch. They do a really good job of diving into the details. So here we go. You ready?
I hope so.
Did you ride the school bus as a kid?
I did.
Aha. So imagine you're riding the bus, you're laughing with your friends, you're goofing around, and then suddenly the bus stops and your life changes forever. The innocence of being a child is ripped away from you, and all you're left with is lifelong trauma. Today, we're talking about one of the strangest mass kidnappings in America. This is the Chowchilla Kidnapping. Have you heard of this before?
Somehow, I don't think I have. That's crazy.
Good. I'm excited about that. I was afraid you might have heard of it before. So we start in 1976. Chowchilla, California was a small, close-knit agricultural town nestled in California's San Joaquin Valley. Life moved at a slow pace with a tight community, local schools where everyone knew each other, and a resilience on farming and small businesses. People from the town said it was basically nothing but cows and farms. The town's tranquil and safe atmosphere made the community feel insulated from the world's troubles, kind of a stark contrast to the events that are about to unfold.
Somehow it always seems to start this way, in like an idyllic town where nothing ever goes wrong.
Right? Like these small towns.
Everything's great.
Where they don't expect anything to happen, and then all of the sudden.
Oh my God.
Back in the 70s, small town America was pretty much like one big family. Neighbors knew each other by name. You'd see folks chatting on the street, gathering at local spots. It was a strong sense of trust and comfort. Everyone believed their town was a safe place to be. But on the afternoon of Thursday, July 25th, the young children from Dairyland Elementary School and driver Ed Ray boarded the school bus. The trip home was like any other. The children were exhausted from the day, but still excited to return home and tell their parents about their day at school. They were actually on a trip to the fairgrounds in the city. They spent the day swimming and just having a good time. This was summer school, so it was children of all ages. They were on the bus laughing, goofing around, as children do. Brothers and sisters, friends, and notably a 14-year-old cowboy named Mike Marshall. Many of the girls had a crush on Mike, but many of the boys didn't know him at all. The driver, Ed Ray, did his best to keep the children at bay. He was a farmer in the town and knew each child by name, just a very wholesome guy from the sounds of it, almost like a grandfather figure. I never had a good relationship with my bus drivers, but this guy seemed like he was really close with the kids. He cared about them.
That's good.
As he drove along his route, dropping the children off, he reached a stretch of orchards and fields. At 3:54, the bus turns a corner and reaches a stop sign. Then a large white van drove into the bus's path, blocking the road forward. Of course, Ed stops the bus. He doesn't know what's going on. 3 men climbed out of the van and walked towards the bus. They were wearing nylon stockings over their faces, and the men banged on the door and yelled at Ed to open it. It was then that Ed saw the several guns that the men were holding. He reluctantly opened the door, and 2 of the men entered the bus. They forced Ed to leave the driver's seat and walk to the back of the bus. The first 3 rows were also forced to the back. Thinking this whole situation was just a joke, one of the children, Jeff Brown, stood up and shouted, "We didn't do it!" Some of the I know, it's crazy to be a kid, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Some of the children laughed, some ducked under their seats in fear. Siblings were gathering together in seats, and the men kept their guns pointed at the children the entire time.
Like, for what? Is there like a motivation that's coming that we're missing?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yeah, we'll find out why.
Scaring children for fun.
You'd think.
Okay.
The kidnappers drove the bus to a shallow arm of the Chowchilla River called the Berendasloe, one of those. There they retrieved a second green van that they had hidden nearby. They ordered the kids on the right side of the bus into the white van. 9-year-old Jennifer Hyde Brown watched as her brother got up and turned back toward her with fear in his eyes as he walked off the bus. The other half of the children were ordered into the green van. Both vans have been modified to transport their victims. The back windows had been blacked out and the interior was covered in soundproof paneling. Terrifying.
Yeah. No, that's really creepy.
Yep. I just can't imagine. Like, they have no idea what's going on. They're just being ordered into these vans. They've got guns pointed in their face.
Even just white vans in general are bad enough, I feel like.
Right? Just
That's
creepy.
Spooky enough.
At this point, the parents of these children were starting to look out for the kids for the bus. They expected them to be home any second. They fixed their children after-school snacks that would go completely untouched. The bus never came. This is when parents started calling the police. Of course, the police thought the bus had just been delayed. Maybe they had a flat tire or had broken down somewhere. How on earth would a giant yellow school bus go missing? As the parents and police searched, they could not find the bus anywhere along the route. They started to gather at the police station, anxiously waiting to hear what the next steps were in finding their children. Now we're going to jump back to the kids. 2 hours after the hijacking, they were in the vans for what felt like hours. They were getting hungry, sweaty, desperate to use the bathroom. Jennifer Hyde Brown said it felt like there were animals being led to slaughter, but she was actually comforting those around her. Several children had been separated from their siblings between the 2 vans and feared that they would never see them again. The children prayed and sang songs, trying to find comfort in the chaos. The driver, Ed, was really quiet, and the children were kind of looking to him for guidance through this whole thing. They were asking if they would ever see their families again, and he could only respond with, "Yes, of course you will," even though he really wasn't sure. In the documentary, he says, like, you know, he was telling the truth in his mind by saying, yeah, of course you're going to see your family, but he didn't know what lifetime they would see their family in.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the town starts searching for the bus. They approached Dan Lawrence to fly his plane around looking for it. This search finally yielded results. They spotted the school bus, but their stomachs dropped when the bus was empty. Nearby counties started sending their police to help set up roadblocks. This was a big event for the area. This never happened. Their police department was just like one small room. There was one phone. They just weren't set up for something like this.
Yeah. So the vans are on the move at this point?
Yes. Yeah, and the school bus is just left behind in a bunch of trees, so it was actually really hard to see from the air anyway. but they did find it. The victims were unaware that they were taken to the California Rock and Gravel Quarry, which was 110 miles from Chowchilla. It was the early hours of the 16th at this point. The victims were escorted one by one to climb down a ladder, through a hatch, and into the ground, where there was an underground bunker. As each child made their way to the bunker, the kidnappers asked their name and age and wrote it down on an empty Jack-in-the-Box bag.
So this seems all really thought out, and they didn't think to bring something to write this down?
Right? Like, everything's very planned, and they're just writing down
They can hide a
information.
school bus, but they can't do that. Okay.
The kidnappers removed the ladder, covering the hatch with a heavy piece of sheet metal, and placed industrial batteries on top. And those weigh like 100 pounds each. They're not just like a car battery, they're like a big, like something that would go in a school bus kind of thing. They're 100-pound batteries. As the victims realized that they were hopelessly trapped with no way to communicate with the outside world, they began to process the scene inside the bunker. The men had stocked it with several mattresses and a small amount of food and water. There were fans installed for ventilation, and there were a couple of small pit toilets, like kind of boxes with holes in them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's
luxury. Ed was given one flashlight, and that's all the light that they had. Everything else was dark. Children searched for their siblings and cried. Ed and the older children tried to keep everyone calm. They had been buried alive. Hours passed, and they were running out of water. It was hard to breathe, and everyone was terrified. Some of the kids even started to hallucinate, which can happen when, like, something traumatic is going on. You can just start to hallucinate.
Oh my god. I feel bad for Ed, because I feel like he's responsible for all of them, and now they're all stuck there.
Yep. He totally is. He's responsible for every single one of those kids. There's 27 people total, including him.
Maybe we should start giving bus drivers, like, some sort of weapon, like a sword, or like a sword. Something that wouldn't be dangerous to children, but, like, I guess a sword would be dangerous.
I like the idea.
Something creative that, you know, he could whip out in case of emergency.
Just like a bat or a BB gun. Or
something. Just on the off chance that you're driving a bus that gets hijacked and all the children are in danger.
A taser. A
taser. That works. It's better than a sword.
Right. But in this case, there's 3 men.
3 tasers.
So he would need 3 tasers.
There you go. We're solving all the problems.
Oh, so remember Mike Marshall, the 14-year-old cowboy kid?
I was hoping he would come back into play.
As one of the older kids, he and Ed started looking for a way out. They found that the only way to get out was the way they had come in. But it was blocked. When Ed tried to lift the piece of metal, it wouldn't budge. As if the situation wasn't already bad enough, the ceiling of the bunker started to creak, and suddenly part of the ceiling caved in. Sand and dust filled part of the bunker, and many children were then convinced that this was the end. Back in the outside world, the media was a friggin' circus. Everyone was anxious for answers. It was the biggest story that happened in the area in many years. Some people called the police station saying the kidnappers were Satanists, or there was a theory that it was the son of Sam that was responsible, or the Zodiac killer. There were absolutely no clues, but police had set up a command post for parents to wait for any news. As you can imagine, parents were really worried, really distressed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, their kids were just gone, and they had no idea what happened to the kids. The school bus was there, but the kids were not. Back in the bunker, Mike Marshall had stepped up. He and Ed pushed and pushed and pushed on the metal. They finally got it to lift up just a few inches, and Mike was able to reach his hand through the opening and felt the 2 industrial batteries. Ed and Mike slowly inched the piece of metal over until the 2 batteries dropped down into the bunker. Ed used his flashlight to look around. There was a box built around the hole. So the hole that they had come in on had a box that was built around it, and then that was all buried underneath the dirt. So they're, like, completely underground.
So where are the batteries? Sorry.
So no, that's okay. So bunker is on the bottom.
Okay.
Where all the kids are.
Yes.
And then there's a hole on the top. And then that hole is covered by a box. And the industrial batteries are like, it's like a hollow box.
Okay.
So how do I explain this?
So they can't move the batteries away.
As of right now, no. But so they've slid this piece of metal that's blocking them into the bunker. They've slid it over just a few inches, and they've realized that there's this hollow box on top of the hole.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they've made a little bit of progress.
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay. There was a box built around the hole, and then the kidnappers had covered that box with dirt, leaving it buried underground. So they slowly start inching the piece of metal over, and then the batteries fell in to the bunker. So they were able to get those batteries off of the piece of metal and get into that hollow box now.
Yeah, so ultimately a good thing as long as the batteries didn't land on any of the kids.
Right, it did not.
Okay, great.
Landed on a mattress.
Beautiful.
Yep. A few people pushed, pried, and pounded at the wooden box. Finally, Mike started digging underneath the box with plywood. And hours later, hours and hours of digging, the wood finally cracked open, the box cracked open, and the children saw the most beautiful ray of sunlight and burst of fresh air. After 28 hours, they had finally escaped. Ed led the children through the trees. The group came across a man who they thought might have been one of the kidnappers. That's what I would think immediately. Is like,
Yeah,
oh shit, that's someone coming to get us.
Best to assume that until proven otherwise.
Mm-hmm. But as the man approached them, he recognized them from the news. He was like, oh my gosh, I know who you are. You were all over the news. And he called the police.
Okay.
So, sigh of relief. The police arrived at the site, taking stock of the victims and examining the bunker. They described the children as, quote, in good shape and in high spirits. They took pictures of every single one of the children, and they were, like, covered in dirt and, like, obviously very hungry and just not, in my opinion, they didn't look healthy. But according to the police, they were like, oh, yeah, they're good.
I guess no, like, visible injuries.
Right. Right. No, no
mentally,
physical.
Probably,
exactly.
Not great.
Exactly. And that comes back later. So,
good.
Hold on to that. No physical injuries, but definitely mental trauma.
Yeah, for sure.
The children were then actually taken to a prison, and they were given, like, fresh jumpsuits for them to change into, so clean clothes, and they gave them apples and cartons of milk.
I mean, that overall sounds good, but after they've been imprisoned, you're taking them to a prison?
Right.
Okay.
Not the best place. I was actually really surprised about that.
Yeah. That is kind of strange.
Right? Really strange. But that was where the police kind of talked to them and made sure everyone was physically okay. And then they transported them back to their parents, who were, of course, relieved. They were all hugging, crying, thanking their God, thanking the universe that the children had returned without being harmed. As the police examined the scene, they discovered that the bunker was made of a 27-foot trailer that had been buried. Like one of those, like, enclosed U-Haul trailers that you would use to move.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it had just been buried completely underground.
Wow.
They looked for any information that they could get. The trailer, they looked at the registration information, but it was registered under false information.
Of course.
Right? The children helped to make rough sketches of the kidnappers in hopes that somebody would recognize them, and they released those sketches to the public. The vans that they used to transport the kids were found in a warehouse building in San Jose. In the vans, they found the guns that they had used to hijack the bus, pieces of plywood and mattresses that matched the ones from the bunker, and a Cadillac that had been spray painted completely black.
Interesting.
So weird, like matte black. In that car, they found a journal with coded writing, like symbols and things like that. And they just had no idea who it was from or what it said.
Okay.
The first break in the case was a call from an employee of the quarry where the children had been buried. During his patrols, he had seen men working with a bulldozer. There were 2 moving vans nearby, and he had also questioned a man working in the scrapyard. This man had identified himself as Fred Woods, the son of the owner of the site.
Okay.
So, going off of that, the Woods family were from the Bay Area, so not even from the Central Valley area where this is all taking place. During the gold rush, Mr. Woods, Fred's father, had accumulated a large amount of wealth. There were parks named after him, places named after him, and he even owned an amusement park. The police searched Woods' estate, and in one of the buildings, they found junk upon junk upon junk. It was just filled with things like old movie cameras, random papers, but they found a desk. And as they sifted through what was on the desk, they found a piece of paper. On this paper was a detailed plan of how the kidnapping was to take place. They found the Jack-in-the-Box bag with all the kids' names. Then they found a ransom note demanding $5 million for the safe return of the children. It was very clear that this was one of their guys. Fred's father was cooperative and mentioned that his son made a living by flipping old cars. On the estate property, there was actually like just tons and tons of old broken down cars, like fancy ones, like Rolls Royces, Jaguars, things like that. So Fred is making a living by buying these cars, flipping them, and selling them. He had partnered up with his high school friend, James Schoenfeld, and James's brother, Rick Schoenfeld. These 2 also came from an upper middle class family. Their neighbors described them as polite, friendly, always pleasant. So all 3 of these men had come from affluent families. So why are they kidnapping the children?
Yeah, and if they're making money by flipping cars, it sounds like they're making money. Like, why?
They don't need it. They don't need the money.
And did the public ever hear about the ransom? Like, did that...
That never got out. They never had gotten that ransom note out.
That's so weird.
And we'll talk about that in a second as well. The police released their pictures, the 3 men's pictures, and started the hunt. Rick actually turned himself in, and he said it was for his own protection. He just walked into the police office with his dad and a lawyer and was like, I did it.
Okay.
James announced publicly that he would be turning himself in, but then the police found him an hour before he was planning to do it. So they found him quicker. Fred was captured by Canadian authorities, so he was in Canada, after they were tipped off by the FBI. They discovered him at a post office. He didn't put up a fight, but strangely seemed eager to speak to reporters. Shocking. Okay, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good?
Yeah.
Following?
I think so.
Okay.
Super weird.
Yeah. So these victims were traumatized, these children. They couldn't sleep. They were afraid of every sound. They were afraid of strangers, riding the bus. They were afraid of every van they saw, afraid of going underground into their basements. Just really traumatized.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the community around them took this crime really personally. They hated these men for what they did. The police actually had to protect the 3 men from angry mobs in the street. They were coming for them.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to hold one child for ransom, and it's another thing to take a whole school bus full of children.
26 of them?
Yeah, that's a bit excessive.
Yeah, a little bit. So why had these men done this? Since they came from families with money, it didn't immediately make sense that they would simply be after the $5 million. Turns out these men had been fighting with their parents, desperate to make their own money instead of relying on their family's money. They discovered that the state of California had a surplus of funds to the tune of roughly $28 million. So they started brainstorming. How could they get the money from the state? The state runs the school system, so let's just hijack a school bus and take the kids for ransom.
Okay, interesting thought process.
Right? How did they get there, right?
Yeah.
They were influenced by the movie Dirty Harry. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
I haven't either, but I watched clips because they were so influenced by this. And there's a character near the end of the movie who literally hijacks a school bus and drives it into a rock quarry.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess no one had seen the movie, maybe? I feel like if they had, they would have put this together sooner.
It's just crazy that they came up with this plan kind of based on this movie.
Yeah.
And remember that coded journal that the police found?
Yeah.
They decoded it. And it was James Schoenfeld's journal. And it was him contemplating whether or not he should join Fred in committing this crime. And then planning the crime. All in coded words.
Okay.
They planned this crime for 18 months. Trying to figure out, like, what school would be the best? What timing would be the best? Should it be during the fall, the spring, the summer? You know, what routes are these buses taking? Where would no one see it happen? The whole nine. Obviously, the ransom note was never delivered to anybody. They had actually tried to call the police station with their ransom demands instead, but the phone lines were so jammed with calls from people about the crime that they couldn't get through. If they had been able to get through, their plan was to have the government fly the ransom money to a spot in the mountains and drop it for them to go retrieve.
How? How are they going to go to the mountains and retrieve it?
Right? Right? This was just their whole plan, and it's all in this journal.
Okay, wow.
The three men, because they couldn't get through to the police, they went home for the evening. Then the news came out that the children had escaped. So their plan had effectively been completely destroyed. And they went into planning mode yet again, plotting their own escape. In Chowchilla, the community was celebrating, actually. They wanted to focus on the good for the sake of the victims. Ed Ray was celebrated as a hero. Some of the children even tried to spread the news that Mike Marshall was also a hero, but it wasn't catching on. Later, the children said that even though the community didn't seem to care about Mike's efforts, they all knew what he had done, and that's what mattered. A plaque was made with all the children's names and put up in the town. Although the community was celebrating, the children were, quote, still in that hole. They were dealing with thoughts of what had happened, what could have happened. Many of them were having nightmares. Anytime they saw a van, like I said, they panicked. They could still hear the screams and feel the hopelessness of thinking they were going to die in that bunker. The school offered no help or resources to help the victims through all of this. Instead, there was a group called the Lions Club that decided that sending them to Disney World might just solve all their problems.
Really?
Spoiler alert, it did not.
Shocking.
And a lot of the children later, when they were interviewed, said that this was more like an intrusion into their trauma, just being like, here you go, Disney World, done.
Yeah. Maybe someone might want to, like, talk to them about what happened or help them, give them some resources, maybe.
Nope. They all still had problems, and it was the 70s, so there wasn't a lot of knowledge or research done on childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Like, that term existed, but nobody really knew what to do with it. But nevertheless, their childhood innocence was long gone. So here comes the trial. A year later, Fred Woods, James Schoenfeld, and Rick Schoenfeld all pled guilty to the kidnapping. After this, the district attorney, David Minier, pushed for more severe punishment. With pleading guilty to the kidnapping, they just had life in prison with the possibility of parole, so they could get out if they wanted to after serving some of their sentence. But this DA was pushing for life without parole. He argued that the kidnapping had resulted in physical and emotional harm. The defense, however, argued that there was no physical damage done and emotional damage was not against the law. This meant that the victims had to testify in court in front of their kidnappers.
Oh my God.
I can't imagine how terrifying that would be, to tell their traumatic story directly in front of the people who did that to them.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't have to prove that it was traumatic. Like, I feel like it's kind of obvious,
right?
That it's traumatic.
Right? And they're children.
Yeah.
It's, to me, I was thinking, like, it must have been horrible, but also they were so brave to do that.
Definitely.
As kids. The men were found guilty of bodily harm. So all three were then sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And they deserved it because they are absolute pieces of shit.
Yeah, for real. That's crazy.
The kidnappers then filed appeals. And the appellate court actually agreed that mental harm is not physical harm and reversed the sentence.
What?
Mm-hmm. Because of this, the men were then just sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, like they originally were. This meant that every 5 years, they would have a parole hearing, and the victims had to testify at every single one.
Oh my God. It's just like never-ending torture for them.
Exactly. They just had to, like, relive the trauma every 5 years and say how it's having an effect on their life, how it affected them back then, and now how it's affecting them as they grow.
Wow.
Somehow, there were also several wealthy, well-respected families that advocated for the men to be paroled.
Why?
I don't know. I guess maybe because, like, Fred's family was wealthy.
Yeah, I guess maybe, like, friends of friends or something.
Yeah.
Like,
it just seems very corrupt.
Doesn't make any sense.
And they even, these families also offered some of the victims money to write letters to the parole board asking for the men to be released.
Oh my God.
Like, what the fuck? I can't.
It's just like one thing after another. Like,
right.
Just constant problems for them.
And as this is all happening, these kids are, like, getting back into their normal, finger quotes, normal lives. Jennifer Hyde Brown, who we mentioned earlier, her brother was in an industrial accident about 5 years after the kidnapping, and he died. Her family fell apart. Parents got divorced, and their family wasn't the only one that had those same effects happen. A lot of these families were falling apart. Mike Marshall fell into alcoholism. No one in the town ever acknowledged his heroism in the escape, and he later said that alcohol and drugs helped him to just forget about his experience. This also was not an isolated incident. A lot of the other kids, as they grew up, also fell into addiction.
That's so sad. And no one ever helps them. Does anything good ever happen? Or is it just one bad thing after another?
Honestly, they're going to have to deal with it for the rest of their lives. A lot of them are still alive.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
But Mike did go to several rehab clinics. He said like 6 or 7 rehab clinics, and none of them really helped.
Right.
In this case.
So sad.
One of the other victims, Larry Park, said that anger infested every aspect of his life. He hated himself. He hated everything and everyone. He fantasized about torturing the men that did this to him. He turned to prayer. He asked God to forgive them because he could not and would not forgive them himself. He actually went through a program that allowed him to go into prison and speak to Fred, Rick, and James. And through that actually helped him forgive them and move past it. There are pictures of him, like, smiling with them.
That's cool. Okay,
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Happy for him.
Good did come out of it.
Yeah.
Ed Ray, the bus driver, passed away in 2012, and a city park was named after him.
Aww.
But the story isn't over.
Oh no.
Oh no. In 2012, Rick Schoenfield was released from prison. James was released in 2015. This was based on the advocacy from those families that were rooting for them, paired with their good behavior in prison. They were following the rules in prison, so they let them out. The victims were thrown into distress yet again. One of the victims, Jody Heffington, fell into major depression and alcoholism. She could not get out of bed. She wasn't taking care of her kids. And this actually led to her death in 2021 at the age of 55. Unlike Rick and James, Fred did not follow the rules in prison. He was selling contraband, like cell phones, to people in prison. And he continued to operate businesses on the outside. He still had his car flipping business that he was operating from inside prison. He had a Christmas tree farm. So just like still trying to do things from inside prison that he should not have been able to do.
If he had the car flipping business the entire time before, during this problem, during being in jail, like, I don't understand. Why do any of this in the first place? Just flip the cars and mind your own business.
Right? Right? But he didn't want to rely on daddy's money, and he wanted money fast because he's a, in my opinion, spoiled rich kid.
Yeah.
He held on to the 2 vans that they used to kidnap these kids because he thought that he could sell them and that they would gain value because of their notoriety.
Oh my god.
Right? So he's just holding on, just a piece of garbage human being.
Keeps getting worse.
Garbage human being. He just didn't even need the money from these vans. In March of 2022, his 17th parole hearing came up. With Jody's death still weighing over the victims, they gave really powerful testimonies against him, but it wasn't enough to convince the board. Fred was released on parole in August of 2022. So dumb. So dumb! And this was only a few years ago that he was released.
California's pretty far, but I feel like we could go over there and just, like, punch him in the face a little bit.
Right?
Just a small amount of payback for the many bad things that this man caused.
Just, like, being a victim of that kidnapping and knowing that all 3 of those men are back in the world, walking around, doing their thing.
Yeah. They don't deserve that at all.
Not at all. Ugh. Since then, the victims of the Chowchilla Kidnapping are still regarded as heroes. They've been able to focus on the good and make positive impacts in their community, and they never gave up. This case has helped people to understand the effects of childhood trauma. This was a big thing in the psychology community of how childhood trauma happens, what the effects are, how to deal with it, so that people that are in school shootings today can get that kind of help.
Yeah, I guess that is one positive of, being able to research this and help other people, even though these kids didn't get the help that they need.
Right. Mike Marshall eventually overcame his addiction and got back on track as a farmer and a cowboy.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. And he competes in, like, lassoing competitions and stuff like that.
So proud of him.
There was also a song written about the driver, Ed Ray, and it's called Ballad of Chowchilla Ray by Robert Goulet.
Nice.
And it's kind of a bop.
All right, I'll have to give it a listen.
It kind of tells the story, yeah. So that's the story of the Chowchilla kidnappings. It's a wild story, so sad, the effect that it had on that small community.
Yeah, quite the journey, for sure.
Brittany, thank you so much for being here and for sitting in on this. I'm glad that I got to tell a story today that, like, didn't result in murder.
Yeah. Honestly, relatively, this is kind of a good ending. There were some positives that came out of this. So.
Yeah. But thank you for being here and, like, spending your time sitting here with microphones in front of your face and listening to really sad things.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No one ever gives me microphones. So nice change.
I'm honored to be the first or second or third, somewhere in there. Has James never put a microphone in front of you?
Not that I can recall. We don't, yeah.
I'll just
Not really a microphone kind of person usually, but
I'll bring you on for background vocals on my next single.
maybe.
Next week, my mom is going to be on the podcast. I usually give a little teaser here of what case I'm going to cover next, but I'm not going to because she keeps asking me what case I'm going to cover so that she can get details on it, and I don't want her to do that, so haha, Mom. And remember, last but not least, friends don't let friends commit crimes. Thanks, guys. Bye.